Hello, my dear friends. A human being is influenced by the culture of the society in which they live. I believe that in the past 15, 20 years, there's been a shift in society. There used to be a certain measure of civility. It was considered normal to treat people with respect. Today, the norm is to be disrespectful. That has replaced civility, and there's hostility, and the discourse is full of rhetoric. This is most apparent in the political arena. The Democrats and Republicans are at each other's throats. Each side is trying to demonize the other and to denigrate them, and the language is tremendously abusive to show how terrible they are. And there's no longer bipartisan support. Each one is trying to show how horrible the other party is. But I think that it's not only in the political arena, it's in general in society. People now take license to speak publicly and privately about other people in a way that I don't think 20 years ago it was not the norm. There's been a lot of discussion about the violence in our society, and Trump, the President Trump there was 2 assassination attempts. Charlie Kirk was assassinated a few weeks ago. Yesterday there were 2 members of the National Guard that were critically wounded. One of them passed away yesterday, a young woman. And there's been much discussion that the violence in society can be attributed to the nature of discourse and the rhetoric that is prevalent in the society. From a Jewish perspective, the Torah's outlook is the exact opposite. Every person is created, B'Tselem Elokim is created in the image of God, and therefore people deserve to be treated with respect. In Pirkei Avos it says, so who's a respectful person? Is it somebody that respects other people? You're supposed to greet everybody b'sever panim yafos, with a smile, because that shows that they're important. You're supposed to say hello even to non-Jews. You're supposed to go out of your way. I always make a point. I walk in the street and I especially on Shabbos, and you pass by people, whether they're Jewish or non-Jewish, say hello. Treat people with respect. The Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, 24,000 perished in a very short period of time because they were lo nogu kavod zeh b'zeh. They didn't treat each other with respect. It doesn't say that they were abusive. Lack of respect, that's already a terrible thing. A Talmid Chacham should be treating people with respect. So I fear that because we live in a culture where it has become, the norm has been to be disrespectful, that ultimately has an influence on us as well. And it's important for us to constantly be aware of that and to sensitize ourselves that we have to treat people with respect. And I want to show 3 examples from the Parsha where Yaakov Avinu, who is one of the great patriarchs, how he treats people with respect. The first example is when Yaakov lived with Lavan for 20 years. It was his father-in-law. And Lavan was deceitful, and he tricked Yaakov numerous times. Yaakov says, "You tricked me 100 times, Asar Monim." And Yaakov had to work for his wives like a horse trade. 14 years for Rachel and Rachel and Leah, and Lavan substituted Leah for Rachel deceptively, and Yaakov worked, took care of Lavan's cattle and flock, and then as a result, Lavan prospered, but Lavan was angry at Yaakov, and in the end, Lavan wanted to murder Yaakov. As the Chazal say, Arami Ovid Avi in the Haggadah, it says that Lavan wanted to murder Yaakov and his family. So that's the kind of father-in-law that he was. He was a terrible person. Nonetheless, when Yaakov was ready to leave, what does he do? He goes to Lavan and he says, Shalchuni ve'elcha makomi, send me away. And then the next passage says, Tanos nashai ve'esiyolada, give me my wife and my children. So Rashi says, why did he do that? What did he have to ask Lavan for? It's his wife, it's his kids. You have to ask your father-in-law, give me permission to go? So Rashi says, Eini rotza lotzei skim b'rishus, I don't want to leave except with permission. And you see that in spite of the fact that Lavan was such a terrible father-in-law, Yaakov felt that's the right thing to do. It's my father-in-law, it's my wife's father. I have to ask his permission because he deserves a modicum of respect given the nature of who he is. That is the first example. The second example is that even more significant is that when Yaakov finally left, so Lavan he didn't tell Lavan that he's leaving because he was afraid that Lavan would not allow him to take his children with him, because Lavan was so angry at him. Lavan accused him, Lavan's children accused him of stealing all of Lavan's wealth. So Yaakov had to escape like a fugitive. So Lavan runs after Yaakov, and Lavan accuses Yaakov of leaving without giving a chance to kiss his children goodbye. And Yaakov says, I was afraid you would steal them from me. And then Lavan accuses him of stealing his idols, and Lavan goes through all the tents and can't find the idols. So finally, Yaakov becomes angry. Vayichar Yaakov v'yarav Lavan. Yaakov was angry, and he fought with Lavan after all these years of abuse and deception and taking advantage. So finally, and now Lavan's chasing after him like he's a criminal. So he's Vayomer Lavan, what he says to Lavan. So what does he say to Lavan? He says, Ma pishi u'machatosi. What is my transgression? What is my sin? What have I done wrong that you run after me like this? And I have to be a fugitive and run away. What you see is you would expect Yaakov to say, you're a crook. And he goes through the fact that Lavan, he tricked him so many times. But Yaakov never speaks specifically about Lavan. He doesn't say, you're a crook. He says, I was deceived by you many times, but he doesn't label him. He doesn't say that he's a Rasha. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he saw the two people fighting, he says, Rasha, Rasha, why are you hitting the other person? Yaakov doesn't call Lavan a Rasha. Lavan was wanted to murder Yaakov. The angel told Yaakov that Lavan wanted to murder him. So when he's angry at Lavan, why doesn't he say, you Rasha, you miserable, rotten, terrible person? What instead the main thrust of his argument is, what did I do wrong to deserve this? Ma pishi u'machatasi. And here again you see the refinement of Yaakov Avinu, that even though Lavan is a scoundrel and he has designs of murdering his family, still Yaakov felt that it's appropriate to treat him with respect, and not to label him as a terrible person, but just that he could talk about all the things that he did, but not to say you are a horrible individual, you're a Rasha. Ma pishi u'machatazi. What is it that I did wrong? That's the second example. Third example, I think, is the most powerful, and that is that when Yaakov was ready to leave, so God appeared to Yaakov, or angel appeared to Yaakov and said that you should go back to your homeland, to Eretz Yisrael. So Yaakov calls, Vayishlach Yaakov vayikra Rachel Leah. He calls Rachel and Leah, and he calls them out to the field, and he says that the Malach, he says that, well, before he says the Malach, he says that, you know how hard I worked for your father, and he deceived me so many times, and 100 times he changed the agreement. And I had to work to marry you. I had to work for 14 years. And I took care of your father's cattle day and night, and in the cold and the hot. And I was Meiser Nefesh. And then after all this introduction, he finally, at the end, he says, and God told me that I should leave. Now, and it's this 10 psukim, this soliloquy that Yaakov gives to Rachel and Leah is 10 psukim long, and it's the last sentence. He says, God told me to leave. So the Shalach HaKadosh asks, why didn't Yaakov tell Rachel and Leah? The first thing he should say is, God said we have to leave. These are great people, the Avos and the Emos, Yaakov and his wives. That's to be the verse. What's there to talk about afterwards? Should be the end of the story. And why does the Torah spend so many 10 psukim? Is an enormous amount of space in the Torah. Why does the Torah have to go on? And you'll see, you look at the psukim, it's a whole long drasha that he gives with all the reasons why he had to leave. He should just say, God said to leave, finish, end of story. So the Shalach HaKadosh says that what you see from here is that when a person is dealing with one's spouse, don't be dictatorial. Don't tell your spouse, this is what we have to do. You have to win over your spouse when you talk to them. So the question is, okay, I hear what the Shalach is saying. You shouldn't be dictatorial, but why would that be dictatorial? Why couldn't he say to them that God told me to leave? Why wouldn't that convince them that they have? So I think the answer is because if without explaining the reason why it's necessary, so then it becomes it becomes something that being imposed. This is what we have to do. There's no choice, and there's to a small extent there's a lack of human dignity when you impose something on another person. You say this is what we have to do. When a person has a boss and the boss says do this and do that without saying please, that is abusive. It makes a person feel like they're not important. And if you don't ask if Yaakov would not have asked his spouse, his Rachel and Leah, his spouses, instead he would said, "This is what we have to do because God said so." That is being not treating his spouses with kavod. And the Rambam says that a person has to mechabed ishto yosem bigufo. A husband has to treat his wife with tremendous kavod, more than himself. And to tell your wife, this is what we have to do because God said so, is a lack of kavod. It's not treating the person with kavod. The first thing you have to do is you have to explain it in nice terms and say, listen, there's been a problem and it's hard to be here and I can't stay, and all the reasons that Yaakov outlines. And then after it's clear why that's the right thing to do, then you can say, and God also told me. But otherwise, it would have been disrespectful to his wives. And then you see, it's an amazing thing how careful a person has to be with the kavod of one's spouse. And it's true not only of one's spouse, it's true of one's children. The Gemara says in Gittin, they'll go olam al yato adam eme yisera beso. A person is not allowed to impose fear in his household. Don't impose your will by fear. And it's true not only with your spouse, but it's true with your children also. Don't make your relationship based on fear, because when there's fear, it undermines the relationship. Of course, you have to sometimes be forceful, especially with young children, but make sure to be treating children with respect. The Gemara says that Erev Shabbos you're supposed to say, you have to ask in their house, did you remember to take care of everything? Did you take Meiser? Did you make an Erev? Did you light candles? But the Gemara says, but it has to be benachas. It has to be pleasant. Don't say, hey, Shulchan Aruch says you have to light candles. Did you light yet? It's almost Shkia. Hurry up. What are you waiting for? That's dictatorial. That's imposing. That's the wrong way. That's not treating people with respect. A person has to be, certainly his wife, ishto yosemi gufo. But it's also true about children. Children need to be treated with respect. I've often been asked by parents, what do I do? My kids don't want to come to davening. They don't want to come on to shul. I try to get them out of bed. I pour water on their head. I beat them up. I punch them. I hit them. I pull them. They don't want to come. What should I do? So I had discussed this with Gedolim years ago, and they said, what should you do? Nothing. Leave them alone. Because if you force them to come to shul, if it's imposed, then they're going to be resentful, and then they'll never want to come to davening. You have to win them over. You tell them in a nice way. You know, it's important to daven. It's good for you. It's good for it's the right thing. But if they don't listen, so they won't listen. Don't impose your will, even though davening is so important. Don't impose your will on other people. And that is exactly what Yaakov practiced. Even though the angel told Yaakov what to do, he didn't impose his will on his wife. He spoke to them with tremendous kavod, because if you treat your wife ishto yosem iguf, you mechabed your wife more kavod than you give for yourself. That's the kavod you give to your wife, and therefore you don't impose and tell them in a dictatorial fashion. This is what has to be. It's Shulchan Aruch and halacha. Treat them with respect, and this is, as I said before, this is in contrast to what's prevalent in our society. It is this attitude of demonizing and not treating people with respect, and disrespectful. We have to, as Torah observant Jews, we have to treat everybody with respect. The strongest influence we have on our children is based on a relationship, and the moment that you impose fear and on people, the relationship dissolves. It can't survive, because that's not a relationship. It has to be a relationship of love and respect. And in that way, we will have the most influence on our children. And I think that these lessons are very important to take away from the parsha, especially in light of what is happening in our own society. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful Shabbos.